Okay, well, welcome. Now we're on to implement and monitor risks. So in implementing, we are doing the thing we love most, which is implementing Order 66.
The time has come. Execute Order 66.
Excellent. So, as we do implement Order 66, this is the process of implementing those agreed upon risk response plans that we just did do in risk response planning. There are a lot of benefits. Some of them are that they're executed in order to address the overall project risk exposure and also to minimize the individual risks, such as threats and minimizing threats and to maximize opportunities. So the PMBOK guide would say that a common problem with project management is that a lot of time is spent identifying and planning risks, yet no action is taken when a risk occurs. So this process, implement risk responses, is frankly new to the PMBOK guide this edition. Remember, each risk will have an owner who will implement that risk response plan that was previously agreed to. Okay. Like anything, this is comes with inputs, tools, and outputs that we'll discuss here. So the inputs are the project plan. So what roles and responsibilities, like the owners, what detail, what stakeholder thresholds and appetites exist? For project documents, I have lessons learned, a risk register. We've been adding to that ever since identify risks. And risk report, which is about overall exposure and individual risks. And then OPAs. Tools and techniques include expert judgment, interpersonal and team skills. By now, it's largely influencing. Influencing becomes the key form of those interpersonal and team skills. And now I need the PMIS. When I implement, I have to tell somebody, I have to collect the documents, I have to do something about it. This often includes software, but the PMIS, the Project Management Information System that you've chosen, becomes a key item that you can use. It can include your schedule, your resource, your cost software to ensure the agreed upon plans are executed. And then my outputs. Whenever I implement a plan, changes happen. So change requests and document updates would be common. Then I'm going to monitor risks. Page 453 of the PMBOK guide, the very last process in risk management knowledge area. So it's the process now of monitoring the implementation of agreed upon risks, right? And I monitor them to look for variances. I'm also going to look for new risks. And I'm going to evaluate how effective my current risk strategy is. And this is going to allow me to make decisions based on current information about the overall project risk, which is gold, and also about the overall exposure, individual risks and overall exposure. So that's exciting. We're going to continuously monitor for new, changing, and outdated individual risks, and also for changes in the overall project risk exposure in this monitoring process. Okay, so my inputs, tools, and outputs follow. Inputs is my project plan, and the risk management plan is going to be key here. My project plan. How? Project documents include the issues log and lessons learned, also the risk register, and which is about individual risks. We've been doing that ever since identify risk process. And the risk report, which is an assessment over overall exposure and will describe individual risks with an owner. Data and reports become inputs too. My tools and techniques include data analysis, which has two forms: technical performance analysis and reserve analysis. Audits. Audits are another tool. We should expect risk audits, just like in quality we encourage an audit, to consider. We want risk experts to come and tell us how effective is our risk management process. There's no pride here. I want you to tell me in advance if I've made a mistake based on best practices or current information, because I want the threats to be mitigated and the opportunities to be enhanced. And then, of course, to do any of this, I have to have meetings. Now, my outputs are my work performance information and project plan updates. Notice in this process, we have all three: work performance data and work performance reports as inputs and work performance information as outputs. In any monitor process, in this case, this is one of the controlling processes, I've always said data in, information out. All we've really added to this risk process is performance reports. So make that note and you will do well. Okay, this is my summary of reserve analysis. There are two forms: contingency reserve and management reserve. Contingency reserve are for known unknowns. What I mean is that I know it's a risk, but a risk by definition is an uncertainty. So I'm not sure if it will execute. So it's a known unknown, and I can plan against it. I did quantitative analysis. I set aside my contingency reserves for schedule or cost, and in terms of dollars. And now I can watch for triggers. Okay. And so basically, I went to the PM. I said, "Hey, here's my justification." The sponsor said, "Wow, thanks for the solid quantitative risk assessment and risk response planning with a risk register and a risk report." So they're going to give me the money that I need to accommodate that. Now, the other reserve analysis includes management reserves. These are for unknown unknowns. I didn't see the risk coming, and so I did not plan against it at all. So I go to the sponsor and I say, "Oh, this happened and I didn't plan on it and I need money." And he or she is going to ask me questions. What is your program cost? Why didn't you see this? How can we avoid this again? And they're probably, most sponsors, I am told, on average will set aside about 11% for management reserves. That's up to them. It's their experience. Okay. The last couple slides are just final thoughts on risk management. Remember, watchlisted items are non-critical. And what do you do with non-critical risks? You document them on the watch list and revisit them periodically, because sometimes their priority will rise with a change in probability and or change in impact. Would you choose only one risk response strategy? Maybe, but you in reality can choose a combination of response strategies, or you may group risks by categories and have a single response for that entire group. What risk management activity is done during execution? Well, I'm going to look for my watch list items and new risks. What is the most important item to address in project team meetings? Risk. Every single meeting I ever have would involve a discussion of risk. New risks, current risks that we're watching, any triggers developing, etc. And risks I could retire now. Okay. How would risk be addressed in a project meeting? Maybe the status. We just did status reports last weekend. That could be one of them. Okay. Risk identification is done without knowing enough about the project. That's true. We're always going to ID risks. Project risk is evaluated using a questionnaire, an interview, perhaps Monte Carlo analysis, and sometimes these things don't provide specific risks. We want to be careful. Risk identification often ends too soon. These are errors, resulting in a brief list, 10 risks or so. I'm making up a number, doesn't matter, rather than extensive risks. The process of identifying risks through quantitative risk analysis are blended, resulting in risks that are evaluated as they come to light. No, the process of ID risks is identified early. The risks identifications are general rather than specific. No, they're specific. Some things can, and clear, remember clear we said, unambiguous. Some things considered to be risks are not certain. That's not true. Risk by itself is an uncertainty. But we noted there. Whole categories of risks are missed. That is an error if that happens. The first risk response strategy identified is selected without looking at other options. Now, we talked about that, alternative analysis. Risk management is not given enough attention during project execution. That is an error if that happens. At every meeting, I would address risk. Project managers do not explain the risk management process to their team during planning. That's an error. Our job is to communicate over and over. My boss at Charter says, if you think you're over-communicating, you're probably just now beginning to communicate. Keep that in mind. And finally, contracts are signed long before risks to project are discussed. No, contracts themselves provide a risk. You're identifying risks in the business case and in the charter itself early on, well before contracts. Okay, that's it. Hey, I've really enjoyed risk management conversation. It is in everything we do, every project, which is life itself. Good lesson. I hope you enjoyed it too. We'll see you again in procurement.